I used to work night audit at a mid-range hotel just off a quiet stretch of highway. The kind of place where people don't ask questions and rarely make eye contact. My shift started at 11 p.m. and ended at 7 in the morning, and most nights were uneventful. Just me, some old coffee, and the soft hum of cameras looping over empty hallways. The real action usually ended by 1 a.m. After that, it was just me and the screens. One night, sometime around 2:40 a.m., I noticed something on the camera feed for the second floor hallway near room 217. A woman was standing there, maybe mid-40s, wearing a long coat that looked too warm for summer. She wasn't moving, not knocking, not pacing, just standing still, facing the door. At first, I assumed she was locked out or waiting for someone to let her in. But after 5 minutes, I realized she hadn't moved a muscle. What got under my skin was the way her shadow looked. There was one dim overhead light above her, but the shadow didn't quite match up. It stretched farther than it should have, too sharp, like it had been drawn on the wall. I zoomed in slightly on the feed. Her hands were clenched, and her head was tilted slightly to the left, as if she were listening through the door. But 217 hadn't had a guest check-in that night. It was marked vacant in the system. After about 10 minutes of her standing there, I decided to go check it out. I took the elevator up and made my way down the hallway, expecting to find her standing exactly as I saw on the monitor. But when I turned the corner, she was gone. No sound, no footsteps, just empty silence and the quiet buzz of fluorescent lights. The hallway looked completely normal. I even knocked on the door to 217, just in case. A man inside answered groggily and said he'd been asleep, hadn't heard anything. He asked if something was wrong. I didn't know what to tell him. I went back down to the front desk, sat down, and rewound the camera footage. But when I scrolled back through the feed for that hallway, the screen glitched. The timestamp for the entire 12-minute period was corrupted, just static. The recording picked up again exactly at 2:55 a.m., as if someone had spliced the feed. I asked the morning manager about it when she came in. She barely looked up from her clipboard and said flatly, "Don't worry about anything you see near 217. I paused. "What do you mean?" I asked. She didn't respond, just walked past me toward the elevator. That was my last week at the hotel. I transferred out. But every so often, I'll have a dream where I'm back there, watching the monitors, and room 217 is glowing, like the lights are flickering inside. And someone is always standing outside the door, back turned, listening. When I was in college, I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour grocery store. The pay was low, but it was quiet, and most nights I was left alone to restock frozen food while listening to music. The walk-in freezer was huge, like a small warehouse, and even though it was freezing, it was oddly peaceful once you got used to it. You'd hear the low hum of the fans and the occasional sound of refrigerant lines kicking in. I actually liked being alone in there. One night, sometime after 3 a.m., I was restocking the frozen pizza section. I had the dolly parked near the entrance and was halfway through unloading boxes when the heavy freezer door slammed shut behind me. Not unheard of. It didn't always catch properly. But this time, when I tried to push it open from the inside, it wouldn't budge. At first, I thought it was stuck, but it felt like something was holding it closed from the outside. Not locked, not broken, just resistant. I banged on the door, called out, thinking one of the other two night staff was playing a prank. But no one answered. I pressed my ear to the metal. Silence. It started to get really cold. I'd left my gloves outside on the cart, and my fingers were already starting to sting. I figured I'd give it a minute or two before calling again. But then I heard something else. Footsteps. Not outside, but inside. Slow, steady steps echoing off the metal floor. I froze. The shelves created narrow aisles in the back of the freezer, and the sound was coming from behind one of them. I slowly stepped toward the source, thinking maybe one of the other workers had somehow come in without me noticing. But as I peeked around the shelf, there was nothing. Just stacked boxes and empty trays. Then I heard breathing. It was low and steady, not mine. It sounded like it was coming from the farthest corner of the freezer. I backed away slowly, turned, and ran to the door again. Suddenly, it opened on its own, just creaked outward, effortlessly. I stumbled out, slamming it behind me, heart pounding. I went straight to the security office and asked to see the feed from the freezer entrance. The footage was grainy, but clear enough to show the door closing behind me and no one approaching after. I was alone. Then I saw something else. The camera inside the freezer, one I hadn't even realized was there, showed a tall, pale figure standing in the far corner, barefoot, motionless. It never moved, even as I panicked and ran around. It was just watching. I quit 2 weeks later. No one believed me. But that wasn't the part that kept me up at night. What haunted me most was the fact that it had let me out, like it had been deciding whether or not to keep me. A few years back, I worked third shift at a massive fulfillment warehouse. It was one of those skeleton crews, me, a guy named Joe, and a couple of others we rarely saw. My job was inventory tracking, walking the rows with a scanner while Joe handled the loading dock. The place was huge, like an aircraft hangar, but it was quiet at night, and the dim lighting gave everything a kind of washed-out, dreamlike feel. Around 4 a.m., Joe radioed in, said he thought someone was walking through row 17. He described it as a tall guy in a hoodie, moving weird. We didn't have anyone scheduled to be in that section, and the front gate hadn't logged any entries since midnight. I checked the monitor for that row, but the feed was out. Just black, static. I told Joe I'd check it out. As I walked down row 17, I started to feel uneasy. The overhead lights were flickering slightly, and there was a strange smell in the air, like rusted metal and cold concrete. I didn't see anyone at first, just pallets, shrink wrap, and stacked boxes. Then, as I turned to leave, I saw something near the end of the row. A single steel-toed boot, just sitting there, exactly like the kind Joe wore. I picked it up. It was heavy, real, still warm like it had just been taken off. I tried radioing Joe again. Nothing, just silence. Then the lights above me started shutting off, one by one, in a line, moving toward me. I ran. By the time I got back to the central floor, the lights were flickering throughout the building. Joe was at the desk, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. I asked him, "Did you go into row 17? He looked confused. "No, I've been here the whole time." I showed him the boot. He glanced down at his feet. Still wearing both of his, I placed the boot on the table, and when I turned back moments later, it was gone, like I'd never picked it up. We reviewed the camera feed for that row. The footage showed me walking through, alone. But in the background, during one of the frames, we caught a sliver of something tall and hunched, standing at the very end of the row. Its head was tilted sideways, watching me. The power went out 2 minutes later.